We are broadcasting tonight from London ahead of the president's first official visit here in England. There's so much that is happening right here in Europe and at home, without a doubt. This is one of the busiest news cycles in years. We have a lot to cover tonight. We have a huge show. Newt Gingrich, Steve Bannon, right here in London, and much, much more. But first, earlier today, President Trump, he attended the annual NATO summit, where he had some very tough talk for European leaders, the ones who rely on your hard-earned taxpayer dollars to pay their national defense. Now, coming up tonight, we'll do something the media won't do. We will break down all of these numbers and explain why, under President Trump, America will no longer serve as the world's piggy bank. And also today, the president singled out the German Chancellor, Angela Merkel, for what is her country's obscene dependence on Russian energy, and for the billions and billions of dollars flowing from Germany right into Vladimir Putin's pockets. And meanwhile, the mainstream media right here at home in America, once again spinning out of control. For months, they were just hysterical over the fake news narrative that Trump is Vladimir Putin's puppet. Well, guess what? Tonight, they're freaking out over Donald Trump's tough rhetoric against Russia. Wait a minute. I thought Putin had all these horrible things on President Trump, and he was compromised. We're going to reveal the blatant double standard, and we have important new developments tonight, shocking actually, surrounding Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, and all their friends in the deep state. Sit tight. It is time for tonight's important breaking news London edition opening monologue. All right, for decades, the United States has been footing the bill for the safety and the security of the European continent, and all while many of our allies all across the Atlantic fail to live up to their commitments. Now, today in Brussels, President Trump made it perfectly clear the U.S. taxpayer is not and no longer going to be Europe's ATM machine. Take a look at this.
Many countries owe us a tremendous amount of money for many years back, where they're delinquent, as far as I'm concerned, because the United States has had to pay for them. So if you go back 10 or 20 years, you'll just add it all up. It's massive amounts of money is owed. Germany is just paying a little bit over 1%, whereas the United States, in actual numbers, is paying 4.2% of a much larger GDP. So I think that's inappropriate also. You know, we're protecting Germany, we're protecting France, we're protecting everybody, and yet we're paying a lot of money to protect. Now, this has been going on for decades. This has been brought up by other presidents, but other presidents never did anything about it because I don't think they understood it or they just didn't want to get involved. But I have to bring it up because I think it's very unfair to our country. It's very unfair to our taxpayer. And I think that these countries have to step it up, not over a 10-year period. They have to step it up immediately.
Now, the president, he's absolutely right. And even the Secretary General of NATO is backing up President Trump. Let's take a look at this.
We are going to discuss many important issues at the summit. Among them is defense spending. And we all agree that we have to do more. I agree with you that we have to make sure that allies are investing more. The good news is that allies have started to invest more in defense. After years of cutting defense budgets, they have started to add billions to the defense budgets. And last year was the biggest increase in defense spending across Europe and Canada in a generation.
Why was that last year?
It's also because of your leadership and because your clear message.
Numbers don't lie, so let's do something the mainstream media would never do. We're going to break down those numbers. Now, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, it was first utilized as a unified military deterrent to the looming Soviet threat and to provide intercontinental stability throughout Western Europe and North America. It was formed after two world wars actually devastated the European continent. It took the lives of hundreds of thousands of American heroes. Now, NATO has a massive budget, around $1 trillion. Now, this year, the United States contributed over $700 billion to that budget. All right, let's compare that to the rest of our allies. The next highest contribution, well, that would come from the United Kingdom. They only contribute $61.5 billion. Germany, a mere $51 billion. Canada comes in, frankly, at an embarrassingly low $21 billion. And the country where NATO is headquartered, Belgium, they contribute only $5 billion. In fact, the United States, you, the American taxpayer, you're on the hook for 70% of NATO's expenses. Now, that's right. We pay 70 cents of every dollar that NATO spends. And while all NATO allies agreed to contribute at least 2% of their country's overall GDP to the NATO budget, the U.S. is only, get this, only one of 4 nations to actually follow through on that agreement and that standard. The United States actually contributes, well, almost double, 3.5% of our massive GDP to NATO's budget. And meanwhile, it's a much different story among our allies. Take a look at your screen. Economic powerhouse Germany, they only contribute 1.24%, not the 2%. And 3 Western European countries, well, they contribute less than even 1%. So that's right, one country, our country, we're proud of, the United States of America, is now bearing the financial burden of NATO and the protection of Europe and North America, while 27 other countries sadly are laughing all the way to the bank. So tonight, under the president's leadership, America, he's putting them on notice, will no longer be the world's piggy bank, and our allies must pay their fair share. And of course, this includes the de facto leader of the EU, Germany. While one of Europe's wealthiest nations fails to properly fund NATO, get this, and the president pointed this out today, they're spending billions of dollars in Russia in order to support massive energy trade deals. In other words, Germany, they're not going to adequately fund the protection of their own country, but they're more than happy to prop up one of NATO's so-called biggest threats, the one they keep telling us about, the bad actor, Putin, in the bad country of Russia. And earlier today, the president called out the German Chancellor, Angela Merkel, for her country's blatant double standard. It's about time. Take a look.
I think it's very sad when Germany makes a massive oil and gas deal with Russia, where you're supposed to be guarding against Russia, and Germany goes out and pays billions and billions of dollars a year to Russia. I think that's very inappropriate, and the former chancellor of Germany is the head of the pipeline company that's supplying the gas. Ultimately, Germany will have almost 70% of their country controlled by Russia with natural gas. So you tell me, is that appropriate? I mean, I've been complaining about this from the time I got in. It should have never been allowed to have happened. But Germany is totally controlled by Russia, because they were getting from 60 to 70% of their energy from Russia and a new pipeline. And you tell me if that's appropriate, because I think it's not. And I think it's a very bad thing for NATO, and I don't think it should have happened.
Now, Merkel responded with what was a vague, indirect, frankly pathetic statement, lamenting the country's history under Soviet control. But now, how can someone possibly make the case that Donald Trump is compromised by Russia or Vladimir Putin? He actually is urging Merkel to get their energy from us, the United States of America, and by the way, end their dependence on Russia. Now, this is a move that would literally cripple Russia's fragile economy. And by the way, if Russia's economy falters, Vladimir Putin is finished. So much for all the media conspiracies, almost 2 years now, all the lies saying Donald Trump is compromised by Vladimir Putin. Now, imagine how many, just for a second, high-paying career jobs could be created in the United States of America if we would get those billions and billions of dollars and we were importing our natural gas to Germany, of which, by the way, we have an abundance of, more than we can use in hundreds of years. And as you might imagine, President Trump's, his tough talk in Brussels was met with absolute predictable hysteria from the mainstream media and, of course, their best friends in the Democratic Party.